Emily, thank you so much for being here.
Looking forward to this conversation.
I have been reading about you and kind of stalking you for years, and then we had this connection. It's super interesting to see what you've done with your business, and as a 21-year practitioner of daily meditation, I am super
Nice.
excited about this conversation.
Bravo to you. I'm excited to hear about your practice because I've only been meditating for 12 years. So you got me beat by over a decade because I like to get competitive about it.
That's right. That's right. Well, I was listening to an interview with you, and I thought it was a great place to start of just understanding how you got into meditation, because I was fascinated by this, and I think my listeners will be too.
Well, I remember even in college, I mean, I grew up in Tallahassee, Florida, very conservative, very Southern, very Christian. I remember even in college joking with my college boyfriend and being like, oh, if we get married, like, you can go to church and I'll be meditating in the garden. And I mean, not that those things have to be in conflict at all. They're not in conflict at all, but I would joke about it even from a young age. But it wasn't until I was 27 doing my last Broadway show. I'd been on Broadway for a year and started having pretty intense anxiety and insomnia and going gray at 27 and getting sick and injured because over time stress has this really negative cumulative effect not only on our minds but also on our bodies and our immune systems. And so long story short, I found meditation and it cured my insomnia on the first day. I stopped going gray. I didn't get sick for 8.5 years. I started enjoying my job. But the best thing that meditation gave me is that I started enjoying my performance. And so I just thought, why does everyone not do this? So I left Broadway. I went to India. I started what became a 3-year training process to teach. And then since then, I've taught over 25,000 people to meditate, which is really exciting. And, my first book came out last year and it sold over 50,000 copies. And, so it's like the world is ready for this information. The world is hungry for ways that aren't necessarily like just the same old pills or the same old exercise and sleep. It's like, we know there's got to be more. I don't think that nature intended for us to be sick and tired and angry and sad all the time. And so I think that when people come home to themselves, when people find this practice, they see just how much they're capable of. They see just how much they can contribute, not only to their lives, but to the world. And then it's like, okay, let's go, let's do this.
That's so cool. And did you realize, like, what was that decision about going to India? That's fascinating.
Yeah, well, it was my first decision was just to go for me personally. Like I just was like, this thing is amazing. I love it. I want to go to the source. I want to learn as much as I can. And it's a pretty cool story. I was in Los Angeles actually on tour. So I was on Broadway when I learned to meditate, and then I opened up. I was in the original cast of the first national tour of a chorus line of the revival. And so our second city was Los Angeles, and I knew there was a bunch of meditation teachers in LA. So I just did some Googling and I was looking for a group meditation, and I show up at this guy's place in Venice and it's just him and his wife. And I was like, well, this is not the group meditation experience I was really looking for. And once I realized they weren't serial killers, I sat down and meditated with them. And afterwards I opened up my eyes and I see this beautiful photo or a painting or something. And I said, what is that? And they said, it's Rishikesh. And I was like, what's a Rishikesh? And they said, that's this town in northern India. We're going on retreat there. Are you coming? And I was like, no. And I looked back at this photo of this bridge and I looked back at them and I said, yes, I'm going to go. So cut to 6 months later, it's my 30th birthday. I'm in India, and every morning at dawn, we would go and meditate on the banks of the Ganges, and we would cross this certain bridge. And this one morning I stopped in my tracks and the sun is rising on the other side of the bridge, and I see the exact same snapshot from that photo in his house in Venice. And I started sobbing, crying. And I know that the me in that moment has gone back to the me in Venice and said, you have to come to India, you have to be a teacher. And so even though I had gone just for my own personal education, originally it was in India that I knew I was going to teach, but I just thought it would be way later, like when I'm done dancing, when I'm done singing, when I'm done acting. And then I moved to LA, and my second day there ran into a teacher I had met in India. And long story longer, I became a teacher.
And you were like, this is it. This is what I want to do.
Well, I mean, it was bumpier than that. Like my teacher training it was about 18 hours a week of meditation. So eyes closed meditation, 18 hours a week. And then on top of that, I was apprenticing. And on top of that, I was transcribing books by hand in Sanskrit and, just moving people through the course. And so it was really intense. But the main thing was the 18 hours of meditation, because as you know, from being a lifelong practitioner, this is not just sunshine and roses. It's not just like, oh, I feel great. You're not just a bliss bunny. It's a deep excavation of every stress and trauma that's ever happened to you. And when you meditate that much, which PS, I do not recommend. I was under daily supervision and I still don't recommend it. It's a pretty intense healing. It's a pretty intense catharsis. And so the flavor of my release in my teacher training was mourning the loss of my identity as an actress. Like I was so sad that this thing that I had done, this person who I had become, that I was sort of mourning the loss of her. But that wasn't even true, because then after I graduated, I ended up, my last performance truly was, I was sandwiched in between Liza Minnelli and Barbara Streisand and Aretha Franklin at a memorial concert. And so even though I was mourning it during teacher training, I still had a few more cool gigs. And then I was like, drop the mic. I'm never going to top that. Goodbye.
Whoa. Wow. It's such a different, we all have different journeys about how we kind of integrate the meditation into our lives. And I think that you took a more extreme change, because a lot of people, and what I think I did for many years was I had two lives. I had the meditation and I was teaching and going on long retreats. And then I had this super intense business career, financial career. And I just kept them separate. And when I try to cross them, eyes would glaze over and it was like, I don't understand. You're kind of weird, and yeah. I just got so used to it because it was from 1999 until I started my business about 6 years ago. So it was a long time where I just kept them completely separate. But yeah. You were feeling that pull. I also had young children when I came into meditation. So I would do long retreats in my closet. One of the retreats was 3 months long because I couldn't leave my kids, nor could I supported my family. So I literally would do a mortgage in the morning and then go spend 12 hours in the closet for 3 months doing because I took Buddhist, tantric Buddhist practice. So I was a Mahayana practitioner for about 11 years before I sort of opened it up. But so counting mantras in the closet so my 1-year-old couldn't find me, but you just do what you have to do, that was pretty much, I knew I was supposed to do that, but I didn't have the ability to leave them. And funny story, my husband, when I would go off on retreats for a couple weeks, he was actually never sure I was going to come home. Because he's like, I don't know what she's doing out there, but she comes back and she's like a totally different person. And there were times where I was like, I'm not sure that I'm supposed to do this mom thing. I feel drawn to this other life. So I can relate to like those moments where you see visions or you feel connection at this deep cellular level, and you just have to act on it. And I was like, okay, well, how do I do this? Just a little different.
Good for you. I mean, that's like superhero status. I can't imagine doing that intense meditation I have a 2-year-old son now, and I can't imagine doing what I did then now in this position. So kudos to you. And like, when you would go on retreat and be like, I'm not sure I'm meant for this mom thing, do you think that there's a piece of you that genuinely is like, oh, I might be a nun, or I might be like reclusive by nature?
I think so. I think that I would see a completely different person in those experiences. Actually, what's funny is now, 6 years into having this be my life and teaching, mindfulness and all of that, I would feel how I feel today, but I would feel glimmers of it for 2 weeks. And then I'd come back into, it wasn't the family, it was really the work that I was doing and the unconsciousness that was involved in in a financial career. They was just so different. And I couldn't find my bearings, but I didn't feel like I had a choice, which has a lot to do with kind of what I talk about in my book and when you talk about those demons and, releasing all that trauma, my circumstances growing up, there was a lot of trauma. And and I went to money because I decided early on that if I had a lot of money, I would be happy. And so money was this protection that I got really successful. I had a huge job. I had a lot of responsibility. It was everything I had worked for, just like you're talking about in your career. And yet I didn't have the confidence to think that I could actually integrate it all together. So I was like, you get 2 weeks of heaven and then you come back to a hard life. And that was what I lived for, 15 years, actually.
Man.
Scary.
Yeah. And so thank you for doing the work that you're doing so that other people don't have to do that. Like there's no need to suffer for some pretend promised land. You know, it's like, it's now, it's here, it's now, it's here, it's now.
Yes, yeah. I'm really interested too in how you found this intersection of helping business people. Because when I look at what you've put together, there's a lot of businesses that you've spoken to, corporations, and bringing mindfulness into it. And I will add that I've been part of the Wisdom 2.0 community since the beginning, maybe 2015 or something. So I've witnessed it happening where it's been brought into technology companies. But I'd love to hear your story of how you were able to do this deep spiritual experience, but then also find a way to make it practical.
Well, I think part of that comes from like what Ziva is. So, you know, Ziva is a trifecta of mindfulness, meditation, and manifesting. And that wasn't always the way. For the first 6 years, I was just teaching meditation. And then in 2017 is when I created the technique and really tried to solve the issues that most meditators are facing. It's just they don't think they have time and they think they have to clear their mind. And so, you know, we address that with the different parts of the technique. But the meditation portion of Ziva is not monastic at all. It is designed for people with busy lives and busy minds. It is designed to be integrated into life. It's designed to give you a bigger return on investment of your time. Like there's nothing about it that would wake up like a reclusiveness or a like go away. And not that there's anything wrong with that. You know, they're different techniques. They serve different purposes in the brain, but because the actual technique was made for, you know, what we call householders versus monks, I think that's part of the practicality of it, where people right off the bat are like, oh, my insomnia is gone. You know, oh, I have more hours of productivity in my day. Oh, I feel smarter. Oh, I can hear my intuition. And that happens, you know, oftentimes within days for people. And so I think that's where it just, you know, people want to see results. People want to see the return on their time investment. And so I think that was a part of it, is the technique itself. And then I also think part of it was my performance background, you know, just having 10 years on Broadway. I'm really good at delivering this stuff. I'm really good at making it funny and entertaining and accessible. And I'm really good at knowing my audience. You know, I know who I'm talking to and what their pain points are and what they're looking to achieve and accomplish. And I feel like and this might change, is changing with Ziva, but what I have done, I think really well, is rebranded meditation as a productivity tool. And really talked about the return on investment. And what I called it, I was very aware that I was doing it. It was very intentional, but it was putting the candy coating on the medicine. It was like, hey, this thing is going to make you more money because you're going to be smarter. Stress is making you slow. Stress is making you stupid. Stress is making you sad. And so I said, hey, it's going to make you more money. You're going to have better sex. And so I was very much meeting people where they are, knowing full well that I don't care if you take the Advil because you think it tastes good because of the candy coating, like you're still taking the medicine. If you do it, if you get to the chair every day, twice a day, you are going to become more empathetic. You are going to see yourself inside of others. You are going to have more capacity. You're not going to be as quick to launch into fight or flight. And so I was very, you know, not shy about leaning into the candy coating aspect. Like now the world is changing and it's changing really quickly. And so I think that it's afforded me the luxury of not even having to talk about the candy coating so much. Like people are like, oh, I'm stressed. Give me all the meditation. Like now people are just trying to figure out what type of meditation they should do, versus before I really had to kind of sell people on it.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I love the fact, because this performance piece that you talk about is definitely one of those things that I had no experience in that. In fact, you know, on that scale for whatever, whether you're extrovert or introvert, I'm like right in the middle, just a little bit extrovert, but like that part of figuring out how to show up and be comfortable on the stage and be comfortable holding that space isn't something that I would have sought out. But in the course of being, a business owner and having all these social media channels, I've had to learn things. And I still am like, I'm probably not going to be the performer, but learning that has taken time because there just was no training for that.
Yeah, and it's a whole skill, speaking on camera, being comfortable in front of a camera, showing emotion, like being vulnerable, like those are skills, just like meditation is a skill. And it takes time to learn. And if you're busy being a mom and doing 12-hour retreats and growing your business, it's like, okay, now I'm going to take like an acting class and like a full on camera training. It's like, there's only so many hours in the day.
That's right. I will say one of my friends was a voiceover artist, and he helped me do the audiobook recently. And it was such a big deal because when I first read to him, thankfully I had about a month because the book got delayed because of COVID. And I was like, oh, maybe you could help me. And he's like, sure. And so he's like, read to me. And so I read to him and he was like, okay, like it was just this moment of like, we got some work to do because you're gonna make people, if they're driving their cars, they're gonna fall asleep. Like you're acting like you're doing a meditation versus reading a book,
Oh, interesting.
I was like, oh my God, thank goodness you're here. And it totally paid off. Like I did the speeder Reader's Digest version of voiceover work and it worked and they were really happy.
Good for you.
I realized
it's hard work. It's not a joke.
It is. It is not easy.
I never got booked for anything, but I used to audition for voiceovers all the time when I was acting. But I remember my publisher they wanted to hire a voiceover actor to do my book. And I was like, are you out of your mind? I was like, absolutely not. I was like, never has there been a better match of person and project. And so I was like, this is a hard no. Like I will be recording my own book. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And I was actually really proud of it because, they allocated 4 days and they just kept warning me like, it's so hard. It's grueling. It's this and that. And I was like, I used to dance in heels and sing on stage for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week during tech for a decade, right? I was like fully like incensed that they would even consider hiring an actor.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Okay, well, I'm feeling better. Jonathan Fields, actually, one of my mentors, he helped me in negotiating with my agent. But one of the things that he was adamant about is he's like, when you're doing that contract, make sure that you want them to allow you to be the person who puts it in your own voice. And so we put that in the contract. And I mean, who knew? Because you could a lot of people don't want to do it. So,
well, I mean, I get it if it's just not your thing, or if you feel like you have an accent that's hard to understand, or if you don't like your own voice, or, if you have 8 more books to write. Like I get why some people wouldn't want to, but for me, I really wanted to, and, to lead your own meditations, like to have that in someone else's voice, like just didn't feel right for me.
Yeah, that's fun. What do you see coming in the future for your business? I'm so excited that you're a mom. So is this a first child then?
Yeah, it's my first kid. Yeah,
congratulations.
He just turned 2. Thank you. Well, and on that same note, we're just as soon as we can, just as soon as things open up, we're going to shoot Ziva Kids. So we've been working on this for about 9 months. We're working with writers from Sesame Street and child psychologists from Harvard and trauma experts. And we built a whole puppet and I'm so excited about it. So we're going to have what I hope to be the world's best meditation training for children. It's going to be ages 4 through 14, like different segments. And it's teaching them the Ziva technique, the mindfulness, the meditation, and the manifesting. And it's just meant to be as entertaining as possible. And it's 7 days. It's a 7-day course that you can take as many times as you want to. We're kind of hoping that it feels episodic. It feels like a TV episode that they want to come back and watch. So we're shooting that. It should be coming out later this year. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., we're launching a brand new website, which is really exciting. Ooh. And then I just got off the phone right now with someone who wants to potentially do like a series, like a Netflix-y type show. So we're just kind of figuring out what that looks like exactly, because it's a bit of inventing a new genre. I mean, the Goop Lab sort of did it where it's like health attainment,
Yes.
Yes. And Brene Brown had her Netflix special where it was kind of like a TED Talk, but also a comedy special. But so that genre is brewing, and we're talking about what I could contribute that would be relevant and entertaining and accessible for folks. And then book 2, we started working on book 2, which is exciting. And yeah, and that's all I know for now.
That's all.
Yeah.
Wow, that is amazing. Having raised kids while I was meditating and realizing that it is not easy to teach your own children to meditate, right? They're just not that interested. My daughter would come with me when she was, I think, 3 till about 8. She would go with me sometimes on retreats, and they were festivals. So there were teachings about Buddhism, and then there would be meditations, and she was able to kind of navigate what worked for her and what didn't. And she was really interested. And then there came a day where it was like, I'm not interested in that anymore. And now I kind of hope.
How old was she when that day?
I would say probably around middle school. So in middle school.
I need to prepare my heart because I know it's coming.
Every child is so different because my son I'm a Sagittarius, and my son is the same, and he's only a few days away, and I can tell he's like a super deep thinker, but he is not comfortable with like talking about inner understandings. Whereas my daughter is, and she's the older one, so she's like 22 now, and she pays attention to things. She's not sitting and meditating, but I've taught her grounding techniques and things that she needed along the way. And she'd be like, Mom, I use like all through college, grounding was the thing that she would return to, which was so fascinating. She'd get stressed, she knew how to ground, and then everything was fine. So it's like you just celebrate whatever they are interested in taking in versus being like, you need to do this or you have to do this, which by the way, my parents got into TM. My parents were super hippies in the Bay Area growing up, and they went and had a guru in transcendental meditation starting when I was about 7. And then my dad took me and my brother, who had intense hyperactivity issues. So he thought it would help us. And we went and did the whole initiation ceremony. And what was sad about it is my dad sort of used it like a weapon. Like I'd get in trouble and he'd go, you need to go meditate. So instead of go to your room, it was like a bad thing. And so I think that I was very conscious of that. And when I was raising my children, to not be like, hey, I have all the answers and this is what you have to do, instead of like more the teachings. I mean, because I practiced Buddhism, I felt like Buddhism was an amazing tool as a parent because there's just so many stories and so many teachings that come through that channel. And I would give those to them, and probably more for my daughter, because at that time I was learning a lot. My son is much younger. He's 15. He was growing up when I had left Buddhism and started exploring all kinds of other different religions, especially the more Hindu teachers and that sort of thing.
And so, when you would convey those stories, would you just do it from memory, or were there books, or how were you sharing the stories with your daughter?
Yeah, there is a great book that I would use every night for storytelling. I'll have to put the link and find the book, because there were pictures associated with the stories, which they liked, but there were a lot of stories that I would just memorize, and my kids, I'll still say them and they'll crack up because they're like, I know what's coming, but they're parables, right? And there's teachings about the exact same thing that they're dealing with. It's just in these beautiful healing kind of stories.
I mean, it's just been so helpful for me. I mean, everything I've studied from the Vedas, which is sort of, it's like from Northern India, predates Hinduism, but it's been so helpful for me in this tumultuous time where the whole world is changing at lightning speed, to have a framework, to have a frame of reference that grounds me intellectually and spiritually. Otherwise, I'm meditating for 12 years and I feel like I'd be spinning out right now. I would be, we're all being asked to adapt so quickly. And so if you don't have any sort of frame of reference or any sort of lens, a bigger lens to view this through, then it can really knock you off your balance. So I'm just excited to share some of those things with my son in a way that is helpful and entertaining and not dogmatic and not doctrine-y, because I certainly don't want to like punish him with meditation or make him do it.
I don't think you would do that, but but it also, I just think that what I've learned too is, again, I grew up in a home where my parents had had really, really rough childhoods, and they were trying to grow up when they were parents, and they still struggled with it. And so I think in my home, what I have seen is, because of all these teachings and because of all the healing, because of all the meditating, it's who I am as a human being that matters more than anything, whether the kids meditate or not. It's the person I show up as, and the integrity with my thoughts, and the fact that if there is something that isn't right, our family just addresses it very, very quickly, right? That's one of the benefits of a long time practice, right?
Tell me more about that. Like, can you, like, are you just like, okay, family meeting? Or it's just like, hey, when you did that, it made me feel this. Like, is it real time or is it family meeting time?
Everything has its time and place. And I would say, even if I look at this past 6 months, it's such a funny thing, because it's like we can notice things, and we can also be responsible with our thoughts and realize that it might actually cause more pain by bringing something up that isn't, you're not able to be in proximity to it too. You know, because my daughter would have worried about it for months if I had brought it back up in maybe January, for example.
Got it. Yeah.
But
Wow.
we
Thanks for
just
sharing that.
settled.
Mm-hmm.
So just being very aware of how you feel. And in our home, my son has certain behaviors that are really tough. He's a 15-year-old, and we're just talking about him all the time. Like, and he will write letters to us and say, you know what? I need space. Even if I want to go into my own depression, I'm safe there. And I need space to be able to feel that. Please give me space for that.
Wow. You must be so proud.
Well, growing up in a home where you were like, don't feel your feelings. And then also realizing you still have some patterns, because my son's saying, you're not letting me feel my feelings. I'm like, well, thank God you're telling me that, because now I can work with that.
Yeah. I mean, look, I spent 3.5 hours yesterday with my husband and our coach, and we were basically like writing down. So we had to write down 30 haunts from our lives. It doesn't have to be childhood, just our whole life. And then we're unraveling them. And the unraveling is like interviewing your mom, writing a letter to your dad, calling your aunt to find out what really happened. I mean, you know, like you have to be like a detective, because your brain just makes up stuff. You know, we fill in the blanks that aren't true. And so my coach is just like making me get to the truth of all 30 of these hauntings. But the more you do them, the faster it gets, because it's like a necklace. It's like in a bowl. And the second you get to like the middle ball, then it all, you know, unravels much more quickly. But what has been terrifying and enlightening is that it's like, oh my God, I am my mother. And not like, oh, look at the way I chew my gum. It's like, oh, wow. Like, and I thought, I've been in therapy since I was 24. I've been in therapy for like almost 20 years. I've been meditating for 12 years. Like, I had fully thought that I had stopped these cycles. I fully thought that I had like cleared this trauma. And I'm like, oh my God, it's playing out page by page, just like the book. It like was written ahead of time. And you realize how powerful the epigenetics are. And if you don't look at them eyes wide open and deliberately change the story, you will play it out again. And I think that that is a particularly relevant conversation to be having right now, like for our own personal abundance, for our own personal happiness, but also for the collective. It's like we have inherited racism. We have inherited trauma. We have inherited trauma from generations prior. And if we don't look at what we have inherited, if we don't look at the system that our ancestors have created, then we are continuing to play out this suffering. And so it's like, this is not new. Like, this has been happening forever, but we have to wake up to it and we have to do something about it.
Does your husband, partner, does he meditate?
Sometimes. He says he meditates every day. We could fact check that. I don't know. But his point, something he's very proud of. He learned to meditate before I ever did. He went on a 10-day Vipassana retreat in Tibet, before he and I ever met. And then I think as I got so deep into it, and then as it became our whole world with Ziva, he was kind of like your son. He's like, I need like a part of my soul that is not like inhabited by your company. So he's like, you just get out of my brain, you know? And so he kind of paused for a little while, but finally his therapist was like, you should be meditating. And so he went back.
Oh, yeah. My husband's gone through phases where he'll meditate, and um, it's funny because even something for him, even turning off YouTube or turning off searching on the internet about things is a meditation in and of itself. It's like what you don't allow in is noticeable. And so I think he self-regulates and notices where he's optimal and where he's not optimal. But the meditation piece hasn't stuck, it's fascinating, for 21 years of hanging out with somebody.
Yeah. And is that hard? I mean, is it a point of contention in the relationship, or you've just learned to navigate it?
So I'll share a very personal story that was life-changing for me, because back to that first 11 years of going off every year, and I would go on these maybe 2 weeks, twice a year for these long kind of festivals and meditations and leave him with the kids. And that was not easy either, because he wasn't ready to be a single parent with the kids as it was. So that was already a whole big job. Then there was the fear of me not coming back, or coming back with my head shaved and like, okay, you've got a couple weeks and then I'm going back kind of thing. But what ended up happening is, as I was waking up to the truth of who I was, and there were a lot of other things happening. My mom was dying of stage 4 ovarian cancer over a 3.5-year period from like 2004, right when my son was born, until, she passed away. Such an intense period. But I was returning to the cushion again and again. And he was just doing life. And at one point, I was pretty clear I was going to leave the relationship, because the departure was so big. It felt so big. I was just going through so many intense things. And I said to him, I figured out the purpose of my life, but you don't seem to be all that interested in figuring it out for you. And he looked at me and he goes, Lisa, I've known the purpose of my life all along. And I was like, what you talking about? And he's like, it's to be in service of you. And I was like, okay, what? Wait, like, what? And honestly, from that conversation, I mean, there were other things that were going on, but that was like that turning point where I was like, one of the bad things I will say for many people who get into the inner journey, and I will count myself completely guilty of this, is you become so self-centered as you're clearing out all your shit that you don't actually notice what the experiences are like for other people. And that was the moment where I was like, wait a minute, there's something else going on here. I don't understand it. And maybe people's manifestations of how they show up in the world are perfectly fine to be completely different. It's the idea of me creating space for him to be who he is and me to be who I am. And then how do we come together to create a life and a family, even if we are complete opposites in tons of different ways. And even if we do drive each other crazy on a regular basis, there was this depth that I realized I hadn't even begun to understand.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. It's like full body goosebumps. Yeah. Oh, so beautiful.
I mean, I love sharing these stories back and forth, because I think it gives people an idea of like the depths of what happens when we're willing to move in this direction of self-discovery. I think that there's always more opportunity. That's what I'm hearing from you, and even from myself, because I feel like I learn every day new things when I'm willing to, be more conscious about the world. I mean, what's recently happened, like you mentioned, about the racial injustices, and noticing how you can be so focused on one thing and so not focused on something else that has a broad spectrum of opportunity to open our hearts, to open our, conscious awareness. I mean, I'm just amazed that we can learn probably until the last breath that we take, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, Michael Bernard Beckwith, he says that, the apocalypse means the lifting of the veil. And it's like, when your husband said that to you, it was like, that was a lifting of a veil, like waking up. As very privileged white ladies, like, there's been an apocalypse happen. There's been a lifting of a veil of being like just I mean, can't assume what your level of awareness was of racial injustice, but I'll speak for myself, is that I've just been doing as much research as fast as I can, because I had chosen not to see it. I had chosen not to, I mean, I knew, but I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I was choosing to believe that we had healed, and I was choosing to believe that things were better. And as I'm peeling away these layers, it's like, wow, we have an extraordinary amount of work to do. And I think that it is easy to get arrogant as meditators, or arrogant as like someone of like, oh, I'm on the path of self-discovery and I'm more enlightened than you or better than you. And it's like, oh boy, like, it's the more you know, the more you realize you don't know, and that you just have infinite amounts of expansion and loving and growing and healing to do.
Before we wrap up, I'd love what you just said, and I will echo everything you said. It's been my similar experiences for quite some time about many different topics, but this particular past few weeks has hit me very deeply in ways that I didn't even realize I wasn't paying the kind of attention I wanted to it. Mm-hmm. But in this world that we live in, where there's so much focus on the outward experience, right? One way you could label it would be competition, like being in competition with others, or these concepts that are so natural to the normal. But when you've done what you've done, do you live in New York City, or you,
Mm-hmm.
you live in New York City. There's a certain lifestyle in New York City where it's like game face, let's just call it that, something like that. How do you balance back and forth between showing up the way that sort of people might expect you to show up, but then also having this deep experience of things? Like, are you actually paying attention to that? Or maybe early on, was that something you were paying attention to? Mm-hmm. And the humility too.
Well, I mean, I feel like if you had asked me that question a week ago, I probably would have had a very different answer than what I have right now, because I've been very recently waking up to my own levels of codependency. And my working definition of codependent is someone who puts other people's happiness above their own. And that is my husband, my son, my mom, my sister, my clients, my team, like everyone, all of my students. And part of like putting their happiness above my own is an image of who you think they want you to be. And so I'm just really trying to figure out, well, okay, well, who am I? Like, if I've been trying to be something else for everyone else my whole life, then like, what is underneath that? I mean, that's one layer. And I feel like I am just me all the time. Like, I feel like because of the acting, because of the teaching, because most of my teaching is improvisational and channeled, like there is a simultaneity of very human Emily left brain ego and very divine inspiration, nature flowing through me. And so that simultaneity is something that I've practiced and cultivated for thousands and thousands of hours. Yes, with the meditation, eyes closed, but then also with the teaching. And so, in the beginning it was either or, you're either in like game face, go time, or you're in meditation. But what I love about this practice is that really the whole point is the blending. The whole point is the simultaneity, and inside of the practice and eyes open, because this practice was designed for householders. It's not, I don't feel any duality from the practice. It's been more like my own emotional trauma that has made me have like a performative face and my internal like vulnerability. I think every human has that to some degree. It's just, I would like for those things to be more aligned. Mm-hmm. But as far as the practice goes, it's always felt very integrated to me. Like in the beginning, when I first graduated from teacher training, there weren't really any other meditation teachers in this style in New York. It was just a bunch of monks and me. And I was like, why? And then I noticed that people would learn, they become teachers, and then they would leave New York. And I think it was because part of the teacher training, it softens your nervous system so much that New York can be quite abrasive and hard to handle. And I think there's a level of maybe fortitude or resilience that I had cultivated by being on Broadway that allowed me to weather the abrasiveness of New York, even while softening my nervous system.
Wow, that is really cool. I love hearing you describe that. Thank you so much for sharing it, because I definitely have noticed there's sort of, maybe because I'm still learning some of these techniques that you learned on Broadway and in your acting and in your improvisation of, being, who are you to complete strangers, and who are you to the folks who understand, who know, who are on the journey, and like learning that. But even having this book come out, one of the big realizations that I've had for myself is, because my work goes so deep, I feel like I want to talk to people as if they had read the book. It's just like, because I'm living inside of that book. That is the experience. And if I can just focus on talking to the people who have read the book, it will allow me, even if it's not true, it allows me to be more of the real person that just is like, we're just going to go deep, even if it takes you a little while to catch on. Does that make sense? Like, I just want to drop that away.
That's smart. And also from a marketing perspective, like, people don't like an open loop in their brain. So if you're talking about a concept as if someone already understands it, they're going to want to close that loop for themselves. So it will likely lead to more book sales. So good job.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been amazing. And I'm taking away a lot. And I really appreciate your vulnerability and your humility and just having a conversation.
Well, thanks. Same to you. I really appreciate your stories. Most of them gave me goosebumps. So thanks.
And next steps for people who want to learn more about the meditation and the books, we'll put links in so people can find them. But do you just want to say some things for the audio?
Yeah. I mean, the easiest is zivameditation.com, which is kind of a weird word, but it's ZIVA, zivameditation.com. And there you can find the book. The book is called Stress Less, Accomplish More, because who doesn't want to do that? And you can find our online course, which is called Ziva Online. And we also have a really beautiful self-care center, which I'm really proud of. We started it right when COVID hit, and it is full of so many free resources, interviews with my therapist, interviews with trauma specialists, brain experts, neuroscientists. I have a lot of guided visualizations for immunity, for anxiety. I have kids guided visualizations and breath work. So it's a really robust, all free, and that's all at zivameditation.com.
Thank you so much. That sounds wonderful. I can't wait to dig in.